I like that. And the egg in the hair from the hair.
Welcome to the SIS Live Talk Show. I am your gracious host, Sable B. Pronouns are she and her. I am joining you from a corner in my bedroom on today because the office is a hot mess and I just didn't want to embarrass you like that. But I love the plant thing we have going on, Leslie, because this is my first time with like plants in the background. So we're already in synergy here, as you can see. And I am so excited for this evening. I know if this is your second, third, fourth one, you're like, Sable, you're always excited. But it's true because I only want to talk to people that I respect, love, and adore in some capacity. Much like I think all of the other guests, except for Ayana Angel, I've talked to Leslie for hours on the phone and have still yet to touch Leslie in person. And then COVID hit. So maybe this year, this will happen. And I have no excuse because Leslie's a short drive away. It's not like other folks who are like miles and plane rides away, but I digress. We will get there. So this particular session, I was excited for a few reasons. One, because it is Mental Health Awareness Month, because we are now in May, which at this rate will be gone before you know it, because it's already May 10th. But also because one of the members of RBG, when I asked early in the year, what are topics and things you want to talk about, she said to me, this notion of like, you're not alone. It's been a year, it's been a pandemic, all these different things are happening from elections to such. And like just being reminded of that experience that like, sis, you're not alone. So when I thought of that, I was like, I know exactly who could, just guide us in this exploration. Would be Leslie Garcia, who is the CEO of Counseling Space. She is dynamite. She loves all things Black women. She has a special passion for female entrepreneurs because she is one herself. She's worked in different capacities. But what I really adore about Leslie is that it's this fine balance of art and science. We're in a world where everyone gets to call themselves an expert, even if they just came out the womb. And even though Leslie might not refer to herself as an expert in her space, this woman knows exactly what she's talking about. But on top of that, the art piece, it comes from a place of love, understanding, and true care. And if I didn't have this relationship with Leslie, I tried to get her to be my therapist, even though she's completely booked at capacity anyway. But with all due honor, respect, love, and background music behind the scenes, everyone, welcome to the stage, Leslie Garcia. How are you today or this evening?
Oh my gosh, I am so grateful. How are you? Yes, we talk a lot behind the scenes. I mean, just our humor too. We have the plans. I noticed that too. I said, look at that. We definitely have our energies in sync. But thank you so much for having me. I'm honored and I look forward to tonight and future conversations and future episodes. Your platform is one of my favorites. So thank you. I'm really grateful. Thank you, everyone, for having me.
Thank you. So, Leslie, I know in Black and brown neighborhoods, there's a narrative that we've been, I want to say like dismantling and unpacking the last few years about the stigma as it relates to mental health services, seeing a counselor, et cetera. So that's the reality I don't want to deny in any shape or capacity. What I'm really curious to hear from you is, what shift or changes have you seen in the last year with Black and brown women seeking out mental health services with the pandemic that at this point it's like an ellipsis? Some people are saying post-COVID, even though we're not even there yet. So like, what kind of changes have you seen in the last year?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I mean, there are more platforms like yours, right? So I'm very grateful to have platforms like yours who are just destigmatizing and humanizing. And that is really what I love to do, is humanize mental health, be in spaces where we can humanize mental health. And what we're seeing also is that more celebrities, right? So unfortunately, sometimes it takes celebrities to also share their vulnerabilities as well. And you're just seeing so many people we can identify with, people that we know, whether it be our family or neighbor, people in the church, in different, in your community, and speaking up and just speaking up finally and saying, look, I am seeing a therapist, or I'm struggling with my mental health. So it's just more of the self advocacy piece and sharing their story that is so relatable. So I'm starting to, I'm loving it. I embrace it. And the fact that it's enough is enough, right? So in COVID, I call it that we were under house arrest. We start to be we have more perspective in our lives. And no longer, so many of us no longer care what people are going to say, or are they going to criticize. It's our well-being and understanding our true core values, and health being one, because mental health is part of health. So it's just a combination of all of the above, which I truly appreciate, and we're seeing more and more.
I want to take a step back, not a real big step back. It's a mini step, I promise, folks. I would love to hear from you. Like, if you had to give a short definition of like mental health, what would you say to folks? Because sometimes I think that in and of itself is a problem, that you hear mental health, but you picture all sorts of things and it might not even fit under the umbrella. So like, I guess let's just level set. How do you define, and how should we be defining mental health?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we all have mental health, right? So there's a difference between mental health and mental health condition or mental illness. So we all have mental health. And really, to give a very short description, it's just how you deal with life, how you deal with stress, right? How you deal with trauma as well. And that's really the description of mental health. It's just how are you dealing psychologically with your day to day or life transitions, losses in life with stress. And that is really a very general description of mental health that we all have. But mental illness is definitely different. So we all have mental health.
I love that, because as for those of you who know, I started my career as a English teacher. So words have meanings, and I started to realize in my early 20s, when I was in my 20s, that oftentimes folks were having arguments simply because they weren't defining things the same. So you might have found yourself like in a tense conversation back and forth over mental health, because when you're saying mental health, but they're hearing mental condition, and you're not utilizing the same terms the same way. So, just a little life hint here. If you find yourself in a space like, just wait a minute, when I say this, I mean that. Is that how you understand it? And sometimes it can cut through so much miscommunication. But okay, fast forward, bringing us back, because I took us back. Bringing us forward. When you said like humanizing this experience, what does that mean for you? Because I love that. Like, forget destigmatizing. Like, I want to humanize this. Like, tell me more about that.
Sure. It's just really taking away the shame of feeling human when we're going through issues that we need support, that we need a professional to seek support. Just really eliminating that shame and humanizing it, especially when there is 1 in 5. And that was pre-pandemic statistics. So who knows where that's going to lead? 1 in 5 people. So I don't know how many people we have in the audience, but stats shows if it's more than 5 people, and someone is struggling with mental health. So it's just really taking away the shame, because that in itself, the shame has been a major barrier for people to speak up and seek help, is the shame behind it. Yeah.
That's a whole, whenever I hear the words shame now, I automatically think of Brene Brown and how she's done a wonderful job with unpacking shame and guilt, and the difference in the two, in how they aren't often useful in the land of navigating and problem solving and figuring out what to do next. But we don't have time to talk about shame and guilt, y'all, because that's a 8-hour lecture series. If I'm honest. Okay, so present day, if someone, because let me give you a little quick story. Oftentimes, I have a therapist, folks, and it's taken me quite some time to find a therapist that works for me. I currently see her weekly. I've been with her only since January, so maybe one day I'll graduate to bi-weekly. But right now we still at weekly. And I know the journey it has taken to find the right fit, whether that be due to geography, because there's licensing, whether that be to insurance, copay, out of pocket, can I afford your fee, all that good stuff. Like there's so many layers to ending up with someone where the synergies align for your needs, their style, their modalities, etc. But I would love to hear from you, like if you had to give 3, 5, however many quick tips, if you will, of like what to ask when you're having your consultation with the therapist. What are those key, like must ask this to see if it might possibly be a good fit? Because it takes a few sessions to go, oh, I'm digging this, or like, oh, no. So like what would those be? Because so many women I've heard, they're like, I would love one, but I just can't find one.
So I would definitely ask what the specialty is, right? When you start to search for a therapist, you get to see their profile, but you also, when you're on the phone with them, you get to see, you get to feel that energy as well. You get to feel comfortable based on the questions that the therapist asks as well, because we have to ask those questions for ethical reasons to see if it's a good fit. We're not trained to treat every condition, but you want to know what their specialty is as well. You also want to know the logistics as far as what is their schedule like, right? What is their style of working with people? What's their style of working with people? My style is, I tell them, be ready. You're going to do homework, right? It's because the work really starts when you finish sessions. So what is their specialty, their style of working with clients, and also logistics, including schedule, payments, insurance, and so forth. Those are basic questions, yeah.
Sophie put into the chat, finding a therapist is like dating. I don't have any disagreements with that.
I agree. And I would like to share that maybe for 3 sessions. I give it 3 sessions because in the first session, like I tell my clients in the beginning, I'm going to be in your business. I'm going to ask a lot of questions, and this is going to help me determine, number 1, how I can best help you. Number 2, with these questions, you get to learn a lot about yourself as well, and also areas that we need to focus on, right? So the more that we know about you, the better we can help you and really assess the areas that we have to prioritize to begin this therapeutic process, to begin your healing. So yes, and then, you know what? And if it doesn't work, let the therapist know. I mean, it's a learning experience for yourself and also for the therapist. And if it doesn't work, we can talk about it and then refer out to someone who would be appropriate. Absolutely.
How did you discover, and discover might not even be the right word, but so let me rephrase. At what point did you realize I want to be a therapist? Like, did you have another career path in mind and then you changed your mind? Did you always know? There are some folks who knew at 3 years old they wanted to dance and sing, and they've been doing that their whole life. Whereas there are others who, they got to college and started in one field, in one field of study and said, oh, no, and then switched. So like, how did you even end up in this space of mental health? And then not just that, but, counseling in particular?
Absolutely. So no, when I was a little girl, I didn't even know what social work was. I had no idea, but I always loved health. And I would say as a little girl, I want to open up people and fix the inside. That was my narrative as a little girl, right? So I
could picture a baby saying that. I just want to open people up and fix them.
And I don't remember the name of that toy, but I always loved medicine.
Was it Operations?
I think it was Operations. Yes, I loved medicine. And so my father said, well, maybe you want to be a surgeon. So I said, okay, well, that's how I can fix people, open them up and fix people. And so I have been working in hospital settings ever since the early 1990s. I loved health. So I loved chemistry. I loved biology. And that was always my path. I didn't, nothing about dancing, arts, law. It was always about the health. And even in high school, medical assistant, I went to a school that specialized in nursing and healthcare careers. And so I knew how to take vital signs at the age of 17. So that's in my path.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until when I went to undergrad, it was still pursuing the medical career, but it wasn't until I hit undergrad where I was fascinated with psychology. I never took psychology in high school.
Did
So I
you
took
learn about psychology before you got to college?
No, it wasn't until undergrad. I didn't take psych. I mean, you learned about the human behavior. I loved biology. The
Okay, but
biology had
not the okay.
right the functions of the brain and even community engagement or just like how society reacts to certain traumas. And so I
Mhm.
said, you know what, I actually love this. I really want to know more about it. And I had a mentor in college and I would share with her. I don't know how this mentor was assigned to me because she was a social worker. She was a social, and so she said, well, did you think about social work? And I said, no, I maybe should I do psychology? But I really love how this the psychology class, cognitive behavioral, and that's just opened my world. My mentor opened my eyes about just how social work can really impact society on so many different levels, right? Whether it be on individual level, doing counseling, on a macro level, policy level, and still have the health component into it. And
Mhm.
so I say, look, I'm still healing people on the inside. I don't need a scaffold to do it, but it's still part of the healing process, right? So I know that was long-winded, but I had to share that background. Yeah.
No, that was such good intel. I at one point I was going to be a triple threat, and then on the side a doctor, and then I discovered my mother loved ER. In the when was ER was on for so long, but at some point in the 90s, that's all she watched, early 90s. And when I realized it required blood, then I changed my mind to just a triple threat, no doctor on the side. So it's interesting listening to you take us through that journey and starting to talk about traumas that folks are dealing with. And then if I think about your initial definition of mental health, which is basically we all have that, and just how are you navigating and dealing with your daily life, and how you're responding to the ebbs and flows that just happens to be life. I would love to hear because there's a rich conversation happening in the chat. I don't want you all to think I'm ignoring you. I'm just trying to do my best to multitask here. There's a rich conversation happening in the chat with respect to, and I'm summarizing here, but with respect to, I guess, what I will phrase up as, how Western, so Western being, England's of the world, France's of the world, Spain's, Portugal's of the world, basically all of the countries in Western Europe that colonized North America and, Central and South America, the ways in which those populations navigate this mental health space in comparison to some of the really harsh lived realities of folks who are from other countries who might be dealing with war on the ground, who might be dealing with famine, who might, they might be 20 years out of a war, but the infrastructure, you can very much see that there was, difficulties that occurred very much on the ground and how they're still able to navigate in a way. So I would love to hear from you, especially with your background, where your parents are from and being here and, kind of being able to see both sides of, living in America, but also having family who might be from elsewhere. What do you say to like and this is a loaded question for the record. What would you say to the need to address mental health holistically, and the layers with that, maybe mental health conditions, but also just the traumas that exist internationally? Like, would you say the West, some things that the West is doing could be deployed elsewhere, or would you like it's just I guess my question to you is, how do we ensure that no matter where someone is and what past experiences they may have, or what language they speak and what country that they're from, that should be a priority?
No, you're right. And I do believe like one message is again going back to humanizing mental health, right? And so just globally, when you look at globally, depression is the most common mental health condition. And so when we look at, okay, how can we at least transfer the message, or how can we work together with different cultures and different countries? It starts there, right? Starting with humanizing mental health. It starts with education as well. It's not one size fit all when it comes to a treatment modality. I always like to know what are people working with. So when we look at resources, oftentimes we forget, in addition to the external resources that we may have, yes, we think of maybe food, shelter, money, but we also have internal resources. So always assessing what people resources are using or underutilizing as well. An internal resource is actually, we should take a look at it, right? Internal resource can be knowledge. Internal resources, your voice is a resource, right? Your time is a resource. We think about breath, taking the breath. I also share people, your breath is a resource as far as maybe taking time to meditate as well. So, number one, humanizing mental health everywhere. But how do you use that? Language, right? There is a way that you have to assess the culture. Always know your audience, because that statement has to be modified in order to engage with the audience. You're an expert when it comes to language. You're an educator, and like you said, words can mean different things to different people. And also looking at what people are working with. What are some of the resources that they're currently working with? And what are some of the resources that they currently have? Because when someone is such on unbelievable stress and you're trying to teach them to do something different, that's an added stress. But look, this is what you have going on right now, and you can tap into it. This is what you can access right now. So, and it's always start where the client is. That's always taught in school. Start where the client is. Yeah.
There's such richness there. And as you were talking, I was thinking about in the last couple of years, I don't want to say the growth, that doesn't feel like an accurate word either, but I would say the increased awareness of, those of us who come from countries that have been colonized in the past or currently, those of us who come from countries where, the original and indigenous languages and religions and traditions and cultural ways of being were erased and were considered, barbaric, inhuman, and like this way was the right way, which is often a very like Western way of thinking of things. And with that, you've seen this increase of folks wanting to explore like the indigenous practices of their people. So whether their people be from Panama or Colombia or Haiti or, Liberia, like wherever their folk are from, is this idea of like, I want to tap into what, members of my family, culture, tribe, folks used to do, because many of those practices were absolutely helpful, for us in ways of being. So what I would love to hear from you is like, how have you found your clients, or what suggestions have you made with folks trying to like reconcile this very like Western way of addressing mental health and mental health conditions and honoring like cultural traditions, because oftentimes it can feel irreconcilable to people, or just like kind of torn between the two with what is the right way to heal and to find peace and love and all of that good stuff.
No, you're right. And it goes back to assessing, right? So even that cultural piece, and there are components to their culture that can be very supportive to their healing process. So it's all about what is working for you. And there are different dimensions of wellness, right? So
Yeah.
we look at the social piece, right? The social wellness. We look at mental health wellness. We look at the financial wellness. So there's that life wheel, right? Environmental wellness. So when you think about professional wellness, I mean, you're big on that as well. But always assessing, because you want to respect the culture. We have to respect the culture, and it's a big part of us. And so thinking about, okay, not so much of, okay, what is it that we trying to eliminate? Because that's a change. And, as humans, when it comes to making changes, that can be intimidating. Let's see what works so we can maximize it. So it can be a spiritual component. It can be people in your culture that are supporting you when it comes to your healing process, right? It can be some type of foods or herbs, especially in the Latin, come from the Caribbean culture. We're big on teas and
I was gonna say, you better
good like that,
tea.
right? And they actually, a lot of times they work,
They
especially
do.
with the teas when it comes to anti-inflammatory, because stress actually increases inflammation in the body. So looking at old school traditions as far as recipes, so it's always going back to what works. And I'm all about the tradition. Even when we are very spiritual, if there are certain scriptures, like what's the scripture that you always go to when you're going through this? Why not? That's your tool. I like to create a self-care toolbox with my clients, or a self-care portfolio, because maybe that scripture may not be as powerful today because we need to upgrade it to 2 or 3 scriptures, or maybe that tea is not the tea that we need right now. We may need to go into some other type of remedies as well. Oil, right? Or plants in the background. So the culture has so much. It is so rich. Our culture is so rich, and it's not one size fit all. It's about, okay, what is it that, which part can I really tap into to maximize my healing process on top of therapy as well?
I love that, this idea that, and I think sometimes it gets overlooked. And why human beings, we're messy and we're beautiful and we're complex. Like, I don't know how else to deduce it, but this idea of, if a baseball cap and a t-shirt is not one size fits all because our bodies are different in height, shape, weight, etc., then how we go about caring for our mental health, whether we have a condition or not, obviously it's going to be different. But what I really love what you said there is, listen, if you read scriptures, you can still read your scriptures and look at your wheel. Dr. Mary said, I love the wheel. It's like, if you're someone in your culture, you burn sage, you can still burn your sage and do your journal prompts that your therapist gave you. This idea that you don't have to choose between this Western way of thinking, which has been very academic driven. There's a final degree, PhD, we have that final, once you got that, you got it all sort of thing. And your cultural ways of being, it's actually okay to blend the two in a way that works for you. Can you yell that from the mountaintop for me?
Yes.
Okay. I'll find a high the closest highest mountaintop to us.
Let's do it.
And then we can raise it, because I do see how, sometimes it feels like there's a battle online on which way is the right way to heal. And I'm like, this conversation alone doesn't feel healing.
I love your humor.
This doesn't feel like healing at all. So, when you hear the phrase, sis, you're not alone, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
I tell you, especially we attract women who have never been to therapy. So we're always that first one. And I love it. I would say close to 90% of our clients have never been to therapy. So sis, you're not alone I promise you, whatever you're going through, I've heard it before, more than once. I've heard it before. And if you think it's so bad, you wouldn't be here right now. It was that bad, right? And I have worked in prisons. I have done forensic evaluations. I mean, I've done a lot of cases. So when I say, sis, you're not alone, I've heard it before. Been doing this close to 20 years. So just to let them know, your problem is not unique. So
Mhm.
many people are going through what you're going through as well.
So from starting your career off in hospitals to working in prisons, now you have your own organization. I know I was so excited when she was hiring new folks. Oh, because in my mind I was like, more people, yes, to get these services. But and I know you've worked with different school districts and different things in so many different capacities, providing this much needed form of service. What's a common theme or thread you've seen throughout? So I know this idea of, your problem is you're not the only one with this problem. It's not unique. I've heard it before. But what's like another common theme or thread you've noticed no matter what space you were in?
I would share two, especially currently now with the women that we see.
Okay.
There is, feeling. I believe they don't want to own the fact that they need help because their careers are great, right? Financially, they're stable. They just have it all together, and they do. So why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling this way? So there's a level of guilt because they don't feel grateful. They feel like they don't feel grateful, and that is a struggle in itself. Just to really open up to what they're really struggling with. So that's common, especially, with our women. It's like, I have it all together. This is what I went to school for. I can pay my bills. I can pay other people's bills, but yet I'm not satisfied in life. So that's one. The other common one, just really throughout the different populations, is the shame,
Mm.
the shame that they're going through this, or maybe mistakes that they've done in their lives because they just didn't know better, right? So there's a level of shame that for the first time they're getting ready to share a very dark experience with someone that they have been holding on to for so long. So there is a level of shame that I see. So those are the two common ones that I can share with you that I've seen throughout my years in this field. Yeah.
With 20 years of experience and these themes of sis, you're not alone. And I know you haven't only worked with women, so just folks, you're not alone. Um, I seem to be able to check all the boxes to success that, Western world has said if you achieve this and this and this and this, you've done fantastic, you'll be fine. Yet I don't feel fine. And I can't even pinpoint why. And then, shame that that has, formed from possible past experiences, whether that be traumatic, shame can come from so many different experiences with those three threads throughout like a 20-year career. Now, this is a big question, but if anyone can answer this or like work through it out loud with me, would be Leslie. If you were able to like sit in the Washington D.C.'s, the parliaments across the pond, and not my baby pond in the Hudson River that's dividing Leslie and I, like Atlantic Ocean pond, you were able to go to, the different prime ministers throughout, presidents, etc., and put together policy of any shape and form that could actually, make significant moves as it comes to mental health conditions, illnesses, how we treat it, how we navigate it, how we fund it, support it, etc., resources, whatever that might look like. What would be like a policy or the start of a policy that you'd want to get working on? I'm pretending like I got hookups in DC, but one day I might, and I'm gonna say I know who to call.
That is a loaded question.
I
It's
know,
so
I
it's so
know it is.
true. But I mean, I'll give it a shot. The first one is to give more funding, more money. We're always shortchanged. So the first one is to make sure that we get a very a substantial amount of the budget when it comes to addressing mental health.
And just these public services as a whole, it's just the budget's always this big.
It's always small. The second, and it's not in order.
Mhm.
The second is that when you notice a budget that is dedicated to mental health, it's for a particular mental health, maybe like a mental health illness. So the one as far as like with addiction, the opiate addiction, I worked during the crack epidemic, all of a sudden is a public health concern. This is very similar to the crack epidemic, but the people affected look like
So
us, right?
then there's a big push to.
Oh yes, it's a big push for it, and then it's a public health concern. So mental, when it comes to mental health, it's so broad. So I would say when you allocate these funding is to address so many, just like so many concerns and conditions.
Mhm.
But also what we're not discussing, and it should be top priority, the fact that we are seeing more and more people facing mental health challenges, right? It's not like all of a sudden, it's just that we now are having different platforms where people start to feel comfortable to disclose it, right? So the fact that we are having more access to data, we're starting to see more people come forward with it, which is great. However, I don't see, and I would love to be part of this, and anyone who's listening, a push to promote the profession. Number one, to recruit more people. So in the schools, how can we recruit more mental health providers? And how can we compensate them
I was going to say, can we
fairly?
pay them?
Yeah, that is a concern. So when you look at, it's like in America, the ratio is very scary. The ratio is very scary, right? So it can vary to for every 200 people, maybe one mental health. But when you go to international, you're saying Atlantic, across the Atlantic,
Mhm.
it can be 700, but every 700 people, only one
Mhm.
mental health clinician. So we're not promoting the profession the way we should. We're promoting the cause, and we need to take a look at it. And it's more of a
But it's not
reactive,
being backed by resources.
yeah,
Mhm.
not by resources. And also we're being reactive. We're not being proactive. So for example, people who call for mental health services, right? So it's an average of 6 to 8 years that people finally decide to say, you know what, let me call a therapist, right? It's not last week or last month. You're waiting years. And then when you finally do speak to someone, number one, you have to see if it's a good fit, and then the logistics. But so many people are quick to say, "Oh, you don't take my insurance," and they hang up. "Oh, you don't take my insurance," and they hang up. But here's the thing: because it's a very reactive process, insurance will only cover if you have a mental illness, right? So
Mhm.
we want to be more preventive. You're starting to see, to go to the doctor, you'll see screening called the PHQ-9,
Mhm.
patient health questionnaire about depression. And so we're starting to see that. We want to see that more often. But for people who say, um, I'm going through IVF. I feel good. I have a great support system, but many of my girlfriends, they've been stressed, and I want a mental health provider. I want a professional on my side in this journey. And they literally don't have any mental health challenges, but they are being proactive. Insurance are not going to cover,
Mhm.
oh, this is proactive, right? So
Mhm.
it's just so many levels. But yes, having the resources, but also having professionals, because people say, oh yes, I need that help. Like I'm booked, so I have to hire a team, right? We just, and then it's
It's
hard to
not enough
find,
people.
not
Yeah.
enough. And especially,
Especially when you
yes,
want someone
yes,
to kind of look like you know?
absolutely,
That's all I'm saying.
absolutely.
Not look like you, just kind of maybe if you squint, could you could mistake them for family over holiday.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
It's hard. So we need more people to do this work, because you and I say, well, I tell you, sometimes I want to retire because it is so intense. Like we
How
need more people.
and that's a really good segue into I think of the phrase, the strong friend, um, or the strong woman, that at some point I feel like every few months there's like a post or some kind of jargon that is pretty accurate for the record, at least in my opinion, that gets circulated around, like check on your strong friend, because of loads of different variables that we don't have time to unpack. And then I always think, well, okay, even if you identify as that strong friend that needs to be checked on, and you are that strong friend, my brain also goes to the therapists and counselors of the world whose job is literally to hear all of that. So just a quick story. The week that the verdict came out for George Floyd's murder, I had my weekly standing appointment. My therapist actually sent me a text message, but it didn't come through because she herself was feeling heavy, and was like, I'm not going to be of good service to you. I waited for like 15 minutes. I sent an email because I recognized all that was going on, because in my 9 to 5, I do inclusion and equity work globally. So I'm tuned into what's happening in Israel and Palestine, to what's happening in Colombia, to what's happening in India, things that might not make it to mainstream news. I'm always in that space. And then I knew about the verdict. So I literally sent my email after 15 minutes. I said, dear therapist, I put in her name, y'all. But I was like, I waited for 15 minutes. No big deal. It's been a heavy week. I just want to know, are you okay? We can reschedule. I'll see you next week. Just let me know if it's the same slot or we need to switch it up. She responded. She was like, Sable, you didn't get my text message, but I'm no good to anyone today. I tried to send that to you earlier. Thank you for checking on me. Because I was like, I know this is a lot and I'm going to come pour it on to you. Who are you pouring on to? I know they say like therapists have therapists, etc. But I would love to hear, like, in the midst of helping folks heal and navigate and unpack traumas and find coping mechanisms and practicing boundary strategies and giving folks homework and checking, did you do your homework? How do you maintain your peace and your sanity in the midst of all of this?
Especially in the midst of that, your New York City vibrant neighborhood with the ice cream truck behind us. So excuse the ice cream truck.
I think the volume on the one that comes through my block got louder. I was like, did you get extra booming stereo system?
Can we get your schedule in advance? Can I get your schedule so I'll know how to schedule? I know you're trying to get your job, so this way I'll know when to set the Zoom. But I digress. But no, your therapist is on point, because we have to check in with ourselves, because this has been I believe, the most difficult phase in our career as therapists, as medical providers, because this is the first time that we share a space, right? We share a therapeutic space where we're both traumatized simultaneously. And you're not really trained about that in school, right? So yes, one can be traumatized. Like we, as humans, we go through our own trauma. As therapists, you have to process it, make sure that you're okay, because it'll come up. But the fact that it's current, it's present, and we're sharing it with the client, it's so hard. And so what your therapist did knows, like, you know what, I have to cancel. So yes, we either have to understand our limitations. I actually have been looking at my schedule very often and just knowing, okay, this week is not going to be the week that I'm going to be doing back to back. So in advance, and also being proactive about it, making sure that we're not working on our last bar, like on the phone, to make sure that we are constantly filling ourselves up, rejuvenating ourselves. And whether it be taking time off, whether it be maybe downsizing our schedule, whether it be calling our peers and saying, hey, this is what I'm going through. I need support. But yes, we need to do that. We need to be realistic, because it shows up in sessions. It shows up.
Thank you for sharing that, because I remember that week in particular, which was all of 2-3 weeks ago, maybe, scrolling on Twitter. I haven't spent much time on Instagram, but folks, I've been live on Twitter. And I saw so many spaces and communities saying that they were going to pay for 100 sessions for their audience and their community that week to be able to see a therapist. And my brain went, that's beautiful. who checking on these therapists though? Because this is live and current for everyone. So I really adore and appreciate all of the different communities that are working to assist those who might not be able to financially afford these services, because oftentimes there is a significant barrier to receiving these services if you fall within a certain income tax bracket, if your insurance, everyone who takes your insurance is booked, but then the out of fee, if you're supposed to go weekly and their fee is 125, 175 times 4, please someone calculate on Excel, how do I make that work? Like, these are very real things that are occurring for many people. I love that we're finding ways to get our folks the support they need. I was like, but our therapists, we only got a few out there who kind of look like us to begin with. I was like, we got to support them too.
Yes.
Is there like a network that you all kind of like just release? I don't want to say vent, because HIPAA laws do exist, but just like release that energy of all of your clients in a healthy environment.
No, absolutely. And you know what? That point I want to emphasize the fact that yes, we are going through it, right? And I am seeing many of my peers retiring, taking just sabbatical and saying, I'll be back next year. And so, of course, right? So that limits your options because they're going through it and ethically, and they themselves needing to take a break for their mental health. And that's the bottom line. They're human. So to emphasize further, if someone wants to seek help, you already have we have a shortage, and then because of everything that's going, there's no break. Everything that's going on is okay. Now we're now processing this. Now another murder. So it just keeps going and going. And because we're humans, just like, you know what? Enough is enough. I can't do this profession anymore. So if anyone is waiting and saying, "Oh, I'll do it," after the summer, or I'll do it now, because many of us are leaving the profession.
We said, put your name on that waiting.
Yes.
As you were talking about folks retiring, I just remembered a tweet, because remember, I've been on Twitter, y'all, where Lovey, I think she says her last name, Ajayi. I haven't heard it pronounced, but I feel like I've seen it phonetically. Hopefully I have not butchered it, but I know she's written at least 2 books to this point. This was a few weeks ago, but I feel like time is in a strange lapse because of everything that has transpired the last year, where her therapist died. And so she was now grieving the loss of her therapist, where she made great gains with in that healing space, and literally was like, first of all, I'm not prepared to seek out another therapist, but now I have to retell all my secrets, because there was someone who knew me and my struggles, as Nikki saw that too. And I was working through it, and now she's gone. Oh, I said her name correctly. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Mary. Because I hate when folks butcher names and just pretend like, you gonna ask how to say their name, but I digress. So in this grain, Leslie, I know you can't tell us what to do if your therapist dies. I don't want to go down that road. That's a bit morbid. But like, when you find yourself in a space where you've healed, maybe you're moving, from one county to another, there's so many reasons why you can no longer see your therapist. What frame of mind do we have to be in to go, okay, I've made progress. I'm not going to stop my progress. I'm going to have to seek somebody else out. Like, how do you assist and navigate that? Because I literally shed a tear. I was like, when I saw my therapist next, I was like, please don't die on me yet. Not now. I'm not ready. Don't retire.
Yeah, that is hard. That is heartbreaking. Yes. And going back to, right, so many therapists who are leaving, and that's another layer to it as well. Sometimes I like to say, excuse me, but I don't know if it's not too funny nowadays. So I reframed it and I said, I really want to achieve the goal where you can fire me, where you don't have to depend on me. Like, when do we know that you can fire me? That's what that is. Well, that's up to the client. How does that look like?
But what if we never want to let you go, Leslie?
Yes, and we would have to when we know. Because I know there's certain clients, all of a sudden, I know you're thinking about when should I fight, and they just don't, right? But thinking about like what does healing look like for you? So obviously you've had this great connection, therapeutic connection, and just having confidence that this person has given you the tools. This person has definitely given you the tools. But yes, I like to let them know, well, what does that look like? If fire me as a therapist, what does that look like for you? Because obviously now you've gained the tools. You have gained the tools to address some of these changes in life. If we have to make a transition where it's not, just intentional, but life happens and we have to make the transition again, just reinforcing, look, this is what you've accomplished so far. Not so much on the loss, and we will acknowledge that, but going back to, I always like to revisit and remind them the growth, where you were before and where you're at and where you want to go as well. So yeah, we had clients that we had to make that transition because they had to move out of state and because of licensing laws, and be on their side and remind them, this is another chapter that they're.
I love that
Yeah.
framing. Like, what tools do you have? You actually don't need me weekly anymore, or maybe quarterly. You might need a check-in, but you've done the work. Trust yourself to go forth. And I think that's something that it's like a paradigm shift, if you will, because I feel like, and this is, I'm projecting with the dash of observation here, y'all. But the way that medicine, the medical industry, which I wish was not an industry because it's treated like a business, the way it's structured, this idea that it's never ending, there is no healing. You just keep going and returning because it's almost, sometimes it feels like they want to keep us sick because then you can give out medicine, you keep us as a patient, and the cycle goes on and on and on. But what I hear from you, Leslie, is like, no, in this world, at least with me, it's like you have the tools, you came in for something. We might have discovered a few other things, and we've worked through that, and you have what you need, and you can, graduate, baby,
Right.
and go off into the world.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And because we are always very protective about change, because change oftentimes it's interpreted as threat, and threat, we always try to avoid it at all times, right? It just disturbs our stability and our security. But yes, that transition, making sure that, look, this is the work that we did, and we did amazing work. You've learned so much, and it's really the client. It's really, just shedding light and acknowledging the growth that they've done, and making sure that we will be part of the transition. And and I tell them, keep in touch. Let me know how you're doing. Let me know, if any updates. But
you should
still,
never
no
tell
longer.
that to someone like me.
I tell my clients, feel free to keep in touch, especially because they are doing great things in the world, and I want to support and know. But I definitely do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I just say go right ahead. But there's an insurance question, or actually, someone talked about having to switch. Okay, I'm reading having to switch their therapist because their insurance changed. I want to share how insurance works when it comes to the in-network and out-of-network.
Tell us.
Yes, and so many people don't know, right? So you pick up the phone, and let's say you have Cigna, and we say, oh, we don't take Cigna. You're like, oh, we have to find someone who takes Cigna. So in network, how it works, right? So we take Cigna. We have to submit the paperwork. Clinicians, by the way, are the only ones that take insurance, not life coaches, because this is a medical profession. So Cigna will say, okay, we are accepting new providers. So I'm just putting out a scenario to simplify it. We are accepting new providers. This is our application, which is tons and tons and tons of paperwork.
I've seen it.
It's just out of control. And then they'll say, okay, fine, we will have you as an in-network provider, and you will see our members, and this is the rate that we will pay you, right? And I won't even go into the compensation, okay? So that is an in-network provider. But you may have an out-of-network plan with your insurance. And so when I explain this to people, they didn't even know that. So an out-of-network plan is when an insurance says, okay, you want to see a provider that's not in network with us, we can provide some type of coverage. And typically I see one of the two. Either you pay a deductible. After you pay the deductible, they'll pay a percentage, or they'll pay a percentage. And you would never know. You would never know if because we're always stuck on, I need someone that takes my insurance, but sometimes you pay out of pocket less than what you thought, that you would be paying. So always look at, if you're searching for a therapist, or if your therapist no longer takes your insurance, you want to make sure with your plan, if you have an out of network, and you can email me. I have a follow your steps. Pick up the phone, ask this question. If they say yes, ask this. If they say no, move on to the next step, just step by step. So out of network benefit is always good for you to find out.
I researched new insurance here. It happens to be Cigna. Okay, Leslie just knows my whole life. And when I discovered my GYN, she's an OBGYN. She was out of network. I was like, wait, and what's the percentage? Because I am in love and I don't want to depart. So it's like I knew before, but this time I was willing to find out all the details, because I was like, no, oh my God, no, I don't want to go through this hunt again. But I'm looking at the time, so I'm gonna do this in a strategic way. So do me a favor, if you have a question, pop it into the chat. Dr. Mary already has one. Are you taking clients, Leslie? Asking for a friend? The friend is me. But if you have, so that's one question. But any other questions, pop it into the chat. And then in the next 5 minutes or so, we can see, which ones we can address. And then this will have been, I feel like I learned a lot today.
So did I. I appreciate it.
But yes, so are you taking?
I myself am not, because I keep firing myself. You know that, Sable. I keep firing myself.
She fired herself 3 times in the last 3-4 years.
It's the truth. So I'm no longer taking new, but my senior clinician, I was so grateful. She opened up her slots. She's in big demand. Her name is Evelyn Crespo. She's a Norican. She likes to call herself a Norican. But what is so fascinating about her, she loves to work with not only individuals, but also with couples. So we're in New York. So if you're in New York, yes, you can. I can put my email in the chat if you want.
Awesome.
And
then maybe you can send me the list of questions to ask if you're calling folks, and I can just email it out to people, or I can send you their email and you can do the thing. I mean, we'll figure that out, but those questions are crucial. The only reason I didn't bother you, Leslie, when I went on my hunt again to find someone new is because one of my best friends has a practice, and I was like, okay, new set of questions. I'm ready. She was like, and these are your questions. I know you. That sort of thing. So we'll make sure we get that information to you, because I know that is important. And, I think I kind of think of it like financial management, money management, and things of that nature. Some of the skills that would be really, really helpful for you to learn doesn't get taught in school. You're just supposed to wake up one day and know how to do your taxes.
Oh, yeah.
You're just supposed to wake up one day and know how to get your super bill and what a deductible is versus a high deductible and a low. You're just supposed to magically know these things.
Oh, goodness.
So definitely we'll share those resources with you. Last question, and then we'll wrap up, because I know it's dinner time, especially for those of us on the East Coast. I like folks to get in bed early. You want to talk about managing stress? Get your okay?
Oh, yes.
Your sleep.
Don't play with your sleep.
Just go to bed. Go to bed. But one of the questions is, and I'm just summarizing it here, but as far as, Black folks and brown folks, I'm putting us together for this one. Do you think that us who fall into this people of color category, but I'm gonna do melanated, because sometimes we say people of color and they're talking about an East Asian. We're not going to do that tonight. They deal with racism, but it's very different how it plays out in the world. You know, how could we benefit from fixing problems, and problems being societal problems? So that could be water needs, food needs, education needs, like those sorts of societal structures. Addressing those before, and I'm paraphrasing here, Ken, over, mental health. I'll answer that. I'll start first, and then Leslie, you can come in afterwards. For me, the way I've read it, I don't think it's prioritizing one over the other. For me, it needs to be all. Because we've seen what has happened when folks have had all of their needs met, whether it be, clothing needs, food, housing, like all of those needs met beyond what someone might deem necessary, and I'm using necessary loosely here for the record, and still have mental health conditions, because having a certain amount of money in the bank doesn't make you less susceptible to having a condition. Thank you for that, Margie. So for me, it's like, it's not a matter of addressing one over the other. I view it as, I wish as a society as a whole, we address the whole person.
Yeah, that's for us like a psychosocial, especially when it comes to social work, we have to address it. So when someone, let's go into the barriers, right? Mm-hmm. When someone is facing an eviction, we can't go, well, how was your day today? Let's talk about, I need to find out how we're going to get this addressed. And just really prioritizing the need. So you're right. It's all like, it's really all part of the process. And those basic needs they need to be addressed. But then you have, like you said, you have others who that's because it's an external resource. But when you're internally you are not supported, or you have not addressed any internal struggles, whatever resources come your way that's meaningless. So you're absolutely right. It's really addressing both. And it's hard, right? It's hard because there's so many components to it. But when it comes to, let's say, the barriers, and going back to being proactive behind it, like we're so reactive when it comes to solving problems. It ultimately has to come to a crisis. And we want to catch it before it becomes a crisis. Going back to our health, doing preventative care and actions. So yes, when it comes to having those barriers, we have to address those basic needs first, because it does affect your mental health. And then when you have the basic needs, then mental health is how do you deal with stress? Because you have someone who has all the resources, but now sometimes they feel obligated to share it with their community because they're the only ones who have it or have access to it, right? That's a whole... And how do you set boundaries on it? Is that your responsibility? I mean, you can go on and on, but it goes back to your responsibility. I totally agree.
You just started us on a whole nother session at the end of the session.
Yes. Yeah, internal. So you talked about like the basic needs. Those are the external, but then the inner work also has to be in sync. So yes, we need to address all of that and know how to address it. And it comes to prioritizing the need.
Thank you I just hit the computer with my knee. Thank you for that, Leslie. I feel like you dropped so many gems tonight that we can all hold on to. And sometimes it's reminders. And I wish we, and when I say we, I just mean society more broadly, really appreciated the joy of a reminder. Because sometimes you just need to hear it one more time that week or in that moment to go, aha, to take a deep breath and go, I knew that. I know that. I know this. I'm going to be fine. It'll be okay. You have the tools, etc., etc. So thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for sharing, some questions to ask. You even gave us like a mini insurance tutorial. Certainly wasn't expecting that, but in this country, Lord knows we need mini tutorials because I just feel like insurance is a scam and they make it so convoluted and complicated for no reason. It's
Agreed.
like, why is healthcare just not a right? Why must it be a privilege that's tied to your employment? But that's a whole nother conversation again for another day. You are wonderful. Can you not retire until now listen, I believe in wealth and health and wellness and all that jazz. Actually, I don't believe in financial wealth, but that's another topic for another day. Just don't retire until you put someone else like Leslie in your place. You know what I'm saying? You already told us the numbers are small, so I don't want the numbers to just keep shrinking.
No, I know. No, today I'm not retiring. I said today there are times my mentor is like, look, I can't do this, and she's like, Leslie, I'm not doing this with you today. I'm going to work at a cafe or a bookstore. I'm not doing this. And then the next day I'm good. Like, let's do this. Let's call my team and let's do it. So no, I'm not retiring anytime soon. But I have remained fired. I'm not taking in new people. But counseling space is still strong and we're here. So thank you. I appreciate this platform. I appreciate you, all the conversations behind the scenes. It gives me so much momentum.
I'm gonna hug you one day.
Yes, I can't wait. I appreciate your community. And I hope we can do this again. I really do. So thank you. And please reach out with any questions. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm here for you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Have a wonderful rest of the week. If there's anything that comes your way that disrupts your spirit, just take a deep breath and just go, not today, not right now. They'll be fine. It'll be okay. That's been my mantra since like last week. Like, not today. Right. They'll be fine. Like, nope. Deep breath. I start every session with a deep breath. So now when difficult moments come, it's like, Sable, did you breathe? And then I'm like, not today. And I sing my little song. Thank you for your energy, folks. Have a wonderful rest of the evening. I will see you all next month. I'll be announcing the guests soon. And I'm excited about that one too. Clearly, I'm going to be excited till I stop doing these. But take care of yourselves. Have a good one. And mwah!
Thank you. Take care.